On a small peninsula in Dorchester Bay, there lies a ring of structures enclosing a field of wheat. The buildings are crumbling and the wheat grows wild under the watchful golden eyes of a handful of mechanical men. A little over 2 centuries ago, this was the home of Massachusetts Bay University. After the bombs and when the radiation of the Great War dissipated, the old campus found new life as a fishing and farming settlement that rivaled Quincy and Salem in size. Just like those settlements though, by the late 2080s it was brought to ruin. I'm the Irresolute Cartographer, and this is the story of that settlement. This is the story of University Point. In the time before they fled their school, Massachusetts Bay University served many under- and postgraduate students. When the professors weren't giving lectures, they were performing research to bring new funds in for their employer. While the records of many of these projects have been lost to time and the encroaching waters of the bay, we know some details of at least one project. Initiated by Professor Stuart Campbell in the late summer of 2077, this project produced an incredible technology that may well have changed the world had it arrived in time. In 2076, Professor Campbell had been made head of his department by Dean Alan Patterson. When this promotion took place, not only was Professor Campbell guaranteed tenure, but his carefully worded contract gave him a great deal of latitude in taking on research grants. Whether this fantastic contract was a consequence more of his scientific aptitude or his private sector business contacts, we don't really know. But regardless, the professor was quite well set up at MBU. In September 2077, Professor Campbell was contacted by the U.S. Army regarding his research. When word of this meeting found its way back to Dean Patterson, he fired off a mildly threatening email to the professor, demanding answers on what the research entailed. The dean explained that he was leaving for vacation and would expect a full report when he returned in 2 weeks. With the dean already out of the office, Professor Campbell responded frankly, telling Dean Patterson, or Alan as he referred to him, that he was doing his job to bring money into the university, and that the dean should butt out. He told the dean that he had no authority over his work, thanks to his contract, and closed by telling him to have fun on his vacation. Over the next 2 weeks, the Army conducted a program of rapid construction beneath the administration building. In a truly impressive display, they managed to build a secret basement laboratory with one entrance in the neighboring parking garage and another hidden in the vault of the Student Credit Union. When the workers were questioned on what they were building, they referred all inquiries to Professor Campbell. When the university's Human Resources Department looked into this strange turn of events, they found that the professor's contract had a clause in it that allowed it. And further, the legal department told HR that the dean had ignored their notes on the topic and signed off on it. When the lab was completed, Professor Campbell brought 2 of his brightest graduate students on board his project, Curtis Marsh and Leslie Matthews. While Curtis Marsh was a bright 25-year-old with a 3.8 GPA, Leslie Matthews seems to have been something of a genius. At 18, she was already a grad student with a 4.1 GPA and was ready to help the professor in the lab. Over the coming weeks, Professor Campbell only allowed Curtis and Leslie into the lab as long as he was there. He didn't want to risk something going wrong with the equipment when he wasn't there to fix it. Dean Patterson returned from vacation for the start of the fall semester and found the email from Professor Campbell and a note from HR on the construction waiting for him. He fired off a new email to Professor Campbell, rebuking the professor for referring to him by his first name, and again demanded answers as to what this research entailed, adding a new demand for an explanation on the construction. Professor Campbell responded with an email of his own, telling Alan that he didn't have the clearance to know about the nature of his research, nor what the lab was built for, and further, that there was no backing out of this deal. He told the dean that he could attempt to contact Colonel Rosemont, the Army officer who made the deal, but that he should just stop badgering him. The university was set to make a load of money on this, and all the dean had to do was sit back and let it roll in. Dean Patterson wasn't going to let this go, though, and he did attempt to contact Colonel Rosemont. The colonel refused to speak to him on the phone, and when he tried to talk to him on the base, he was thrown out, being repeatedly told that he didn't have the clearance. Undeterred despite the repeated rebukes, the dean continued to attempt to figure out what Professor Campbell was up to. He sent another angry email to Professor Campbell, telling him that he was pretty sure that Colonel Rosemont was just some friend of the professor's, and that he'd find a way in. By mid-October 2077, the dean had given up on a legal route to learning the nature of the professor's project, and was instead having him followed. By this point, Professor Campbell and his grad students had found a way to hide their entering the lab. Ms. Matthews took a cover job at the credit union where she reported to undercover Army Sergeant Rivera, who had his own cover job there. Once at work, Ms. Matthews would descend into the vault and open the secret passage into the lab. Henry Mitchell, a basketball player for MBU, followed Professor Campbell on the dean's behalf. He did this in the hopes that the dean would remove his academic probation. Henry observed that the professor would enter the student credit union when his graduate student Leslie Matthews had a shift there. The professor and his student would then disappear into the vault for hours at a time. While the dean knew that these observations lined up with Professor Campbell and Ms. Matthews working together on his secret project, he finally had something that looked like dirt that he could use as leverage on the professor. Dean Patterson sent Professor Campbell a new email on Thursday, October 21st, 2077, threatening to reveal a supposed scandalous affair to the police and the press if he didn't cooperate. In truth, Leslie was dating Curtis by this point, but that detail wouldn't unreveal the lab and the project's purpose. While there had been that period when Professor Campbell felt that he had to be in the lab, by this point he had determined it was safe enough to be operated by just his grad students, so he elected not to give the dean any further ammunition to blackmail him, and he stayed away. He had prepared a minor contingency in case something kept him out of the lab, in that he changed the password to Leslie's birthday, a fact that he only shared with Curtis Marsh. Curtis and Leslie had been dating for such a short time that Curtis had to go look the date up in student records, a fact that he asked the professor not to tell Leslie. Curtis and Leslie entered the lab without the professor for the first time on Friday, October 22nd, 2077. Leslie seems to have been flattered that the professor used her birthday as the password, and it also seems that Curtis let his ignorance of the date slip. In the early morning of Saturday, October 23rd, 2077, they returned to the lab, expecting Professor Campbell to join them at noon. Around mid-morning, the power went down thanks to some sort of EMP. Sergeant Rivera rushed into the lab and told them to sit tight until he returned, but he never did. 3 days later, with no sign of Sergeant Rivera or Professor Campbell, the tunnel to the parking garage collapsed and they could hear explosions outside. Thankfully, Professor Campbell had stocked the lab with enough food and water to last them for several weeks. They continued their work on the project, sure that if the country was at war outside, it would need the fruit of their labors. Curtis asked Leslie to marry him, and she said yes. Around mid-December, having completed their work and run out of food, they decided it was time to leave. They also decided to take one of their functional prototypes with them and leave the other behind for Professor Campbell should he return. That prototype, a laser rifle known as UP-77 or Limitless Potential, remained where they left it for over 200 years. Limitless Potential is a rifle capable of holding an endless supply of ammunition. To be clear, one could pick up every fusion cell in the Commonwealth and load the energy of those cells into this rifle, and then fire all that energy out of the rifle without the need to reload once. The implications of this innovation are huge, but I'll talk more about that in the closing notes section. For now, let's move on to the history of the settlement that was founded on the ruins of the university, University Point. Though we don't know specifically when, the campus of Massachusetts Bay University was resettled and became known as University Point. By 2085, it was one of the larger communities in the Commonwealth. The settlers grew wheat and fished the bay. They operated shops selling armor, weapons, liquor, and hardware. There had been little to bring University Point to the attention of outsiders until one of its citizens got curious about what lay within the flooded ruins of Sedgwick Hall. Over the years since the bombs, Sedgwick Hall, one of the larger buildings on campus, had begun to slowly fall into the sea. While this illustrious structure had once held lecture halls and the offices for many of the professors and administrators, it now sat on a worrying slope. Half of the ground floor rooms were underwater, and Mirelurks had moved in and taken these sunken rooms as their own. While many of the people at University Point saw these ruined halls as a Mirelurk hunting ground, Jacqueline Spencer was more interested in what salvage she might find there. Jacqueline, or Jack Spencer, was the daughter of Gerald and Josephine Spencer, the owners of the hardware store. Though Josephine passed away around Jack's 3rd birthday, Gerald followed his late wife's wish and encouraged their daughter's curiosity by passing Josephine's toolbox on to Jack on her 6th birthday. When Gerald went into the Mirelurk-infested back half of Sedgwick Hall, Jack asked her father to allow her to come along. As he killed Mirelurks, she scavenged old electronics. She then showed herself to be one of the more clever residents of University Point when she used that old electronic scrap to restore the university's email system. This success drove her to scavenge more supplies, including hard drives for data storage. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to check her newfound hard drive before reformatting it. On it, she found the research of Professor Stuart Campbell, an early version of what eventually led to the Limitless Potential laser rifle. Though the data on the drive was incomplete, it hinted at work on reactor efficiency. Considering this to be a valuable find, Jack attempted to sell it, speaking to a caravan rep and agreeing to a sales deal in which they would split the revenue. Unfortunately, news of this research found its way back to the Institute. In the years before the war, the Institute was the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, one of the most respected schools in the country. When the bombs came down, the institute burrowed into the ground and effectively disappeared from the Commonwealth. Just like Massachusetts Bay University, its ruins sat silent. Unlike MBU, the institute was alive and well. The main product the institute busied itself with was the manufacturing of mechanical humanoids known as synths. Over the years, these synths became the boogeymen of the Commonwealth, especially once they became advanced enough to become indistinguishable from the humans they were known to replace. Thus, it's easy to see how the arrival of an institute agent on the doorstep was the last thing people wanted to see. While Jack searched the ruins diligently for the remainder of the data, her father was dealing with an angry council meeting regarding this unwanted visitor. The monthly meetings of University Point were usually a fairly dull affair in which the influential members of the community worked out minor complaints, decided crop export limits, and discussed the purchase of necessary equipment. The special session called August 12, 2085 was far different. Mayor Burt Strickland brought the meeting to order and then played a tape of his meeting with the Institute's representative. Though the people of University Point didn't know it, the man the mayor had met was Kellogg, a supercentenarian cyborg and one of the most dangerous men in the Commonwealth. On the recording, Kellogg gave the mayor 2 days to turn over the research data, or the Institute would take it from them. Though Kellogg didn't even mention Jack's name, they all knew she was the one responsible for their predicament. Mayor Strickland did what he could to maintain order in the meeting, but fear and anger ran high. While one of the town council questioned the legitimacy of the threat, another suggested they hand Jack over to the Institute. Gerald didn't take well to the suggested sacrificing of his daughter, and a fight broke out. The mayor managed to restore order and adjourn the meeting with the promise that they would vote on the matter the following evening. Gerald returned home and forbade Jack from continuing to salvage the flooded area. She didn't know all that had transpired in the preceding hours and tried to explain that she needed to keep looking for the data. With this confirmation that she was responsible for Kellogg's visit, her father told her to stay in her room. It wasn't long before Jack began to receive threatening emails from all over town. There was even a message that accused her of being a synth. Well, Gerald tried to calm Jack by convincing her that Kellogg was just a scammer looking to take a full cut of the sale of the data. Jack was worried that he could be the real deal. Angry emails were zipping all over town. Along with the threats to Jack and Gerald, there were multiple demands to the mayor that he hand Jack over to the Institute and hope for the best. Jack believed that if she could get her hands on the data, she could potentially stave off this disaster. She decided she couldn't just hide in her room. She left an apology for her father and returned to her search. Unfortunately, as she slipped into the back of Sedgwick Hall and began her search anew, the 2-day deadline given by Kellogg passed. The Institute was merciless. Synths burst into the settlement, blasting anyone they came in contact with. The people of University Point attempted to fight, and a synth or two did fall in the attack, but for the most part, it was a slaughter. Mayor Strickland was killed in his closet, shotgunned by his side. Gerald Spencer fell in the family hardware store. The synths managed to break into the back end of Sedgwick Hall, and they killed Jack as she searched Professor Campbell's office again. When the fighting was over, the synths that assaulted the settlement were abandoned there by the Institute, left to wander the ruins. In the years to come, University Point served as a warning to the Commonwealth to give the Institute whatever they wanted or face annihilation. That should do it for the narrative story of University Point, but I have some notes on the topic I want to share before closing things out. First, Massachusetts Bay University appears to be an analog of the real-world University of Massachusetts, Boston. UMB was established by the Massachusetts General Court in the summer of 1964 with a $200,000 appropriation and opened in a temporary location the next fall. While this temporary location was in downtown Boston, there were many that didn't want the university permanently established there. A lot of Boston's real estate was already tied up in the tax-exempt properties of the dozens of colleges, universities, and nonprofits within Boston city limits. A final location was chosen at Columbia Point in Dorchester. This location wasn't without controversy. The chosen site was next to the poorest public housing development in New England. The students protested what they saw as the state attempting to gentrify those people out of the neighborhood. Along with this, the closest MBTA station was a mile away, and those were just the problems in the surrounding area. The site itself was a former landfill that had only been covered a few years before. This meant that when drilling began for the foundations, the workers had to stop now and then to allow the methane to dissipate. Being surrounded by salt water on 3 sides led to serious rusting issues. Being directly under the flight path of Logan International Airport meant that all the buildings had to be soundproofed. In the end, despite the protests of the students and the faculty and the problems with the environment, the school was relocated to its current site in 1974. Even once the campus was built, there were problems. It seems that the contractor that built the library was corrupt and didn't build the structure properly. Thus, bricks were known to fall on passing pedestrians until it was fixed. From what I've seen, the university has overcome its founding issues, and it's been undergoing a rehabilitation project since around 2005. I will note here that I think it's possible that Cedric Hall's subsistence into the bay may be a nod to the landfill origin of the point. Second, it seems that the first debate of the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore took place in the Athletic Center. This site can be visited in-game if you consider the basketball court to be that athletic center. Third, there's a number on a chalkboard in Jacqueline Spencer's room. I searched the internet for this number and found that it is Coulomb's constant, a proportionality constant used in electrostatics equations. Fourth, the railroad has been kind enough to mark University Point with a danger rail sign. Fifth, the possible companion Deacon once lived in University Point. He was part of a gang there known as the University Point Death Claws. There is a lot more to this story, but I'm going to save that for a Deacon-specific lore video. Sixth, there is some bad information on the Dean's terminal. For starters, all emails have the same date and time on them, August 12th, 2077 at 5:42 p.m. I don't think that this date is right for any of these entries, as the earliest email on the terminal appears to be a response to an email he sent to Professor Campbell on September 15th, 2077 at 3:23 p.m. It's hard to explain how he could have received a response to his first email over a month before he sent his email to Professor Campbell. Beyond this, the first email, entitled About My Research, has its sender listed as G. Spencer, or Gerald Spencer, who wouldn't occupy the ruins of the university until over a century later. Seventh, the tech contained within UP-77 is amazing to consider. The ability of this gun to store endless quantities of ammunition is of course a great boon in terms of combat, but consider what else could be done with this research. Effectively, what we're looking at here is the creation of batteries with what amounts to an unlimited capacity. While America in the Fallout universe was on its way to a future of a fusion reactor in every car, these batteries could have made a huge difference. Imagine if instead of trying to put a fusion reactor in every car, they had instead produced electric vehicles with these batteries. Batteries that could hold the charge required for a car to drive coast to coast without the need to stop to charge. They could have focused on large-scale fusion power plants to power the grid and powered vehicles with these batteries. While there's no conceivable way that these batteries could have stored an infinite amount of power, they appear to be a massive improvement over the highest-end batteries we have today. Eighth, it appears that Henry Mitchell, the basketball player tasked by Dean Patterson to spy on Professor Campbell, got screwed over. It's apparent that he was on academic probation and performed this service for the dean with the understanding that he would be back in good standing when he found the information the dean needed. Despite having provided the dean with the appearance of the dirt he needed against the professor, Henry Mitchell's name is nowhere to be found on the list of students. The dean used Henry's labor and then threw him away when he felt he didn't need him anymore. It's always possible that there was some other reason that he wasn't on that list of students, but I think this feels consistent with Dean Patterson's character. Ninth, Mayor Strickland acted incredibly irresponsibly and could be blamed for the inability of some of University Point's people to escape the Institute's attack. According to Mayor Strickland, he met with Kellogg on August 11th, 2085. It was at that time that he was given the 2-day deadline to hand over the research or face the consequences. Rather than call an emergency meeting the second Kellogg left, he waited until the evening of the next day, August 12th, 2088, to hold that meeting. At the end of that meeting, he set the vote on what to do for the next night. This procrastination set the vote on what to do about the threat to a time after the 2-day deadline. Had the community properly considered the threat the day that it was made, they could have prepared for the attack or even evacuated. Instead, they were paralyzed by Mayor Strickland's indecision. Another minor note on the mayor: his dresser holds a copy of the outfit worn by the mayor of Diamond City. I thought this was an interesting little tidbit. 10th, it's possible that the skeleton of Dean Allen Patterson can be found in his office in Cedric Hall. This skeleton, found behind the dean's desk, is not surrounded by blood, implying that it's one of the older skeletons in the hall. While there are other bloodless skeletons here, his office was locked, and there is reason to believe that he might have been killed before the bombs. Dean Patterson was obsessed with Professor Campbell's work. No matter how many times he was told it was classified and he couldn't know what it entailed, he pushed his nose deeper in. I'm not going to pretend that Professor Campbell was blameless here. He played on the dean's insecurity, taunting him by referring to him by his first name even when told not to, belittling his position by telling him to spend the money that he brought in on a scoreboard or some other useless thing. In the end, Dean Patterson went too far. His attempt to blackmail Professor Campbell was a terribly dangerous idea. After having been rebuked by the professor and the army for which he was working, he told the professor that he would reveal his work to the press if the professor didn't reveal the confidential army research information. Given the nature of the military-industrial complex, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the dean met his end in a tragic accident while sitting at his desk. 11th, there are several Radiant quests that target University Point. If you feel you've been here before but you can't remember why, it's probably through one of those. Lastly, when I started to write the intro to this video, I got to a line that was something like, "There was a time when this set of ruins was home to a settlement just as big and influential as..." And then I stopped, and considered just how devastated Boston is when the sole survivor exits Vault 111 in 2287. It's one of those things that's completely obvious if you stop and think about the overall state of things, but when you focus on individual stories and settlements, well, to use the old cliche, you can't see the forest for the trees. There was a time in the past with a significantly higher level of stability in the Commonwealth. There was a time when the Minutemen protected the people, when there was more than just a handful of settlements, when things were going well enough that the people considered creating a Commonwealth provisional government. All those things were eroded away over time. The castle fell, then Salem fell, then University Point fell, then Quincy fell, and the Minutemen fell with it. When the sole survivor exited Vault 111, the Commonwealth was in a death spiral. I always had a problem with the fact that so much of what happens in the Commonwealth is completely dependent on the actions of the sole survivor. It's a very video gamey thing to do to make everything dependent on the player, but the truth of the matter is that the Commonwealth needed the sole survivor. When Nate or Nora escaped the vault, they had a mission on their mind. While most of us immediately deviate from that mission to go dungeon diving or to explore the wastes or to grow settlements, if we play the role of the loving parent that's hunting for their child, we have to do everything we can to get them back. To that end, we save the Minutemen from complete destruction. We kill the most dangerous Institute agent alive. We discover the means by which the Institute's forces come and go. We build new settlements to support the construction of a means of accessing the Institute. In the act of attempting to save Sean, we pull the Commonwealth out of its death spiral. Alright, I think that'll do it for the story of University Point. If you want to receive notifications when I launch these lore videos, you can follow me on Twitter at GamingWithMaps. I've started streaming on YouTube again. I'm going to do this at least once a week going forward. I don't have a specific time nailed down, but I'll announce when I'm going to stream a day ahead on Twitter. If you're interested, come by and check it out. If you appreciate what I do here and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron with Patreon. I want to thank my patrons Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, Jill AWS, Dark Malcontent, Brian, Real76, Dr. Orion, Samsung Smart Fridge, and Night Spearhead for their support. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.